When Farmer Tom touched the cold metal of the helmet, he didn't know the letter inside would rewrite his entire family history. Welcome to Secret Stories. Before we continue this incredible story of buried secrets, hidden truth, and a discovery that changed everything a family believed for 40 years, tell me in the comments from which city in the world are you watching this video today? And if you believe stories like this need to be heard, hit that subscribe button and help us share these powerful narratives. We're growing every day, and I sincerely thank you for being part of our community. The Nebraska sun was beating down mercilessly as Tom Matthews guided his John Deere tractor across the familiar fields of his family farm. At 45, he had been working this same land for over 2 decades, ever since his mother Sarah had passed and left him the 300-acre spread that had been in the Matthews family for 3 generations. Tom had always felt a strange connection to this particular field, the one farthest from the farmhouse, bordering the old creek that ran along the eastern edge of the property. His mother used to tell him that his father had loved this field most of all, that he'd spend hours here just walking and thinking before he shipped out to Vietnam in 1974. Michael Matthews, a name Tom had heard whispered throughout his childhood but never really knew. The father who had died in combat when Tom was just 6 months old. The hero who never came home. The ghost who haunted every family photograph with his absence. As Tom worked the field that spring morning in 2019, preparing for another corn planting season, his tractor suddenly lurched to a halt. The metal blades had struck something large and immovable beneath the soil. Tom cursed under his breath, expecting to find another rock or piece of old farm equipment that had been buried over the years. He climbed down from the cab and walked to where the earth had been disturbed. What he saw made his heart skip a beat. Protruding from the dark Nebraska soil was the unmistakable shape of a military helmet, green paint faded and chipped, metal surface rusted but still intact. Tom knelt down and carefully brushed away the dirt. As more of the helmet became visible, he could make out faded lettering on the side. His hands trembling, he traced the barely legible words with his finger. M. Matthews. The world seemed to stop spinning. Tom's vision blurred as he stared at the helmet that bore his father's name. How was this possible? His father had died in Vietnam, thousands of miles away from this Nebraska farmland. How could his helmet be buried here, in the field his father had loved? With shaking hands, Tom carefully extracted the helmet from the earth. It was heavier than he expected, and as he lifted it, he heard something shifting inside. The helmet wasn't empty. Tom carried it to his truck and drove back to the farmhouse, his mind racing with questions that seemed to have no logical answers. Once inside, he placed the helmet on his kitchen table and stared at it for a long time, as if it might speak and explain its impossible presence. Finally, he turned the helmet over and looked inside. The interior padding had long since rotted away, but there, nestled in what had once been the crown, was a plastic bag. The bag was yellowed with age but appeared to be intact. Inside, Tom could see what looked like folded papers. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely manage to open the bag. When he finally extracted its contents, he found himself holding an envelope and a single sheet of paper, both remarkably well preserved thanks to the plastic protection. The envelope bore his name in handwriting he didn't recognize. For Tom Matthews, my son. The letter was dated April 15th, 1975. Tom's breath caught in his throat. April 1975. According to every official record, every military document, every condolence letter his mother had received, Michael Matthews had died on April 12, 1975, in a firefight near Saigon. But this letter was dated 3 days after his supposed death. With trembling fingers, Tom unfolded the letter and began to read. My dearest son Tom, if you are reading this, then somehow fate has brought you to this place, to this field that I love so much, and to the truth that I buried here before I had to disappear from your life forever. I don't know how old you are now, or what kind of man you've become, but I hope you'll understand why I had to do what I did. The official story is that I died in Vietnam on April 12, 1975. That story is a lie, but it's a lie that saved my life and protected you and your mother. I was captured during a classified operation that officially never happened. For 3 months, I was held in a camp that didn't exist, being interrogated about missions that were never authorized. When I finally escaped, I learned that my unit had been listed as KIA to cover up the illegal operation. I was officially dead, and staying dead was the only way to keep the people who sent us on that mission from silencing me permanently. I made it back to the States in late 1975, but I couldn't come home. Not really. Not safely. For 20 years, I lived in the shadows, moving from town to town, taking odd jobs, always watching, always making sure you and your mother were safe. I saw you take your first steps in the backyard when you were 13 months old. I was there, hidden in the tree line, when you played in your first Little League game. I watched from a distance when you graduated high school, and I was so proud I nearly blew my cover by cheering too loud. I know this is impossible to understand, and I know you must hate me for abandoning you, but I want you to know that not a single day passed that I didn't think about coming home, about revealing myself, about being the father you deserved. But every time I considered it, I remembered the men who had died to keep their secrets, and I knew that my existence put you and your mother in danger. Your mother never knew I was alive. She grieved for me, mourned me, and eventually found peace in believing I was gone. I couldn't destroy that peace, and I couldn't risk your safety. So I stayed dead, and I watched over you both from afar. I'm writing this letter in 1995, 20 years after my supposed death. You're 20 now, a fine young man working the family farm, and your mother is sick. I can see it in the way she moves, the way she's losing weight. I want to go to her, to hold her one last time, but I can't. The people I ran from are still out there, still watching, still waiting. If you're reading this, it means I'm gone for real this time, and somehow you found your way to the place where I buried the only proof of who I really was. This helmet is all I have left of my old life, the life where I was your father, instead of a stranger watching from the shadows. Inside this helmet, you'll also find the address where I've been living. If you choose to find me, you'll learn the rest of the story. You'll understand why I had to stay away, and maybe someday you'll forgive me for choosing your safety over your happiness. I love you, son. I have always loved you. Every sunrise I watched over these fields, I was thinking of you. Every sunset, I was praying that someday you'd understand. Your father, Michael Matthews. Tom read the letter 3 times before the words truly sank in. His father hadn't died in Vietnam. He had lived for 20 more years, watching Tom from a distance, protecting him from threats Tom never knew existed. The address at the bottom of the letter was in North Platte, Nebraska, about 2 hours away. Tom looked at his watch. It was just past noon. He could drive there and be back before dark. But as he prepared to leave, another thought struck him. His father had written this letter in 1995, 24 years ago. What were the chances he was still alive? What were the chances he was still at that address? The drive to North Platte felt like the longest 2 hours of Tom's life. His mind raced with questions, with scenarios, with hopes and fears he didn't know how to process. When he finally found the address, a small apartment complex on the outskirts of town, his heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. The apartment manager, a kind-faced woman in her 60s, listened to Tom's story with growing amazement. "Michael Matthews?" she said. "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry. Michael passed away about 5 years ago. But you know what? You look just like him. I always wondered about his family. He never talked about them, but sometimes I'd catch him looking at old photographs." She led Tom to apartment 3B, which had been cleaned out and re-rented years ago, but she remembered Michael well. He was the quietest man, she said. Kept to himself mostly, but he was always helpful, always kind. Paid his rent in cash every month, never caused any trouble. But I'll tell you something strange. Every year around your birthday, he'd disappear for a few days. Said he had business to take care of back home. Tom felt his knees go weak. How do you know when my birthday is? The woman smiled sadly. Because he told me. May 15th, he said it was the most important day of the year, the day his son was born. He never explained why he couldn't be with you, but I could tell it broke his heart every single year. Before Tom left, the apartment manager gave him the name of Michael's closest neighbor, an elderly man named Frank who had lived next door. Frank was in his 80s now, but his memory was sharp, and he had stories that made Tom's eyes fill with tears. Your father was a good man, Frank said. Troubled, but good. He used to sit on his balcony every evening, just staring east toward something only he could see. Sometimes he'd show me newspaper clippings about a young farmer making good, winning awards for crop yields and land conservation. Never said it was his son, but the pride in his eyes gave it away. Frank disappeared into his apartment and returned with a box. Michael asked me to keep this, said if anyone ever came looking for him, someone who looked like family, I should give it to them. Inside the box, Tom found years of carefully preserved newspaper clippings about the Matthews farm, about Tom's achievements, about his high school graduation, his marriage to Linda, the birth of his children. There were photographs taken from a distance of Tom working in the fields, playing with his kids, living the life his father could only watch from afar. At the bottom of the box was a final letter, dated just months before Michael's death. Tom, if you found this box, then you found the truth, and I pray you can find it in your heart to forgive an old soldier who loved you too much to risk your life by being in it. Know that every day I spent away from you was a day I chose your safety over my happiness. Know that watching you become the man you are has been the greatest privilege of my life. Know that you were never abandoned. You were always protected, always loved, always watched over by a father who would have died 1,000 deaths to keep you safe. The field where you found my helmet is where I used to go to feel close to you. I buried it there because I knew someday you'd work that land, and maybe if God was kind, you'd find it and understand that I never really left you. I was always there, in the soil, in the wind, in the love that grows from the ground up. Take care of the farm, son. Take care of your family, and know that somewhere, somehow, I'm still watching over you, still proud, still loving you with every breath I never got to take in your presence. Your father, forever. Tom drove home in a daze, the box beside him containing a lifetime of hidden love. When he pulled into his driveway, his wife Linda and their 2 children ran out to greet him. As he hugged them, Tom understood for the first time the impossible choice his father had made, the choice between being present and keeping them safe. That evening, Tom walked out to the field where he'd found the helmet. He stood there as the sun set, looking west toward the sunset his father had watched for 20 years from an apartment balcony 2 hours away. For the first time in his life, Tom felt his father's presence not as an absence, but as a protection that had never stopped surrounding him. He planted a small oak tree on the spot where the helmet had been buried, a living memorial to a love that had grown in silence, in sacrifice, and in the faith that someday truth has a way of rising from the earth where it's been planted. Because sometimes the greatest acts of love are the ones that remain hidden. Sometimes protection looks like abandonment, and sometimes the most profound presence is felt in what appears to be absence. Tom's father had been there all along. In every successful harvest, every family dinner, every peaceful night's sleep. He had been there in the way love can be there, invisible but unbreakable, buried but never forgotten. If this story moved you, subscribe to our channel, hit that like button, and tell us in the comments. Have you ever discovered something that changed everything you thought you knew about your family? Share this video because everyone deserves to remember that love sometimes wears the disguise of distance, and the greatest sacrifices are often the ones that go unseen.